September 2025 gave us some serious surprises at the movies. Big names, big budgets, and some big disappointments. From star-studded projects that couldn't draw a crowd, to smaller films that barely lasted a weekend, the box office was full of shockers this month. Stick around, because the #1 flop might just be the most unexpected disaster of the year. Some flops you can see coming from miles away, but others blindside the industry. A big, bold, beautiful journey was the latter, a movie that looked like a guaranteed success on paper, directed by the acclaimed indie stylist Kogonada, whose earlier works like Columbus and After Yang earned him critical darling status. This film had all the prestige and commercial potential in the world. Add in a dream cast: Margot Robbie, Colin Farrell, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and Kevin Kline, and you would expect the studio to be celebrating a prestige hit. With a reported budget of around $45 million, this was no small art house experiment. It was a serious studio gamble, blending magical realism with a romantic road trip narrative about love, memory, and second chances. The visuals were lush, the pitch irresistible, and the movie just in time for awards season. But when it finally hit US theaters on September 19th, a big, bold, beautiful journey limped into the box office with a paltry 1.4 million opening weekend, numbers that would be disappointing even for a no-name indie, let alone a film headlined by Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell. By the end of its September run, the film had only managed about $3.5 million in the US and Canada and another $4.5 million overseas, bringing its worldwide total to just $8 million. Critics were split right down the middle. Supporters admired the artistry, the cinematography, and Kogonada's willingness to swing big. IndieWire praised its dreamlike visuals and melancholic tone, calling it an ambitious meditation on love and loss. But many others found it hollow and too vague for its own good. Several reviews labeled it beautiful to look at, but emotionally empty, while some audience members admitted they couldn't even follow the story. The film holds only a 37% tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes, and the cinema score was a lukewarm B-, which is often a death sentence for a film relying on word of mouth. In the end, a big, bold, beautiful journey might go down as September's most shocking box office disaster. For Kogonada, it's a painful reminder of how risky artistic ambition can be when blown up to a $45 million scale. Animated films usually have a built-in safety net. That's why it came as such a surprise when Light of the World, an ambitious animated retelling of the life of Jesus, completely failed to find an audience this September. Directed by animation veterans Tom Bancroft and John J. Schaefer, the project aimed to be both spiritually moving and visually appealing. The story follows the life of Christ through the eyes of the Apostle John, blending scripture with sweeping animation meant to rival larger studios. It wasn't a small investment either. Reports placed the budget around $20 million, a hefty sum in the faith-based animation space. The cast featured voice talent like Ian Hanlon, along with recognizable names from Christian media, and the producers leaned heavily into church marketing campaigns to rally audiences. But when release day came, the turnout just wasn't there. Despite heavy promotion in Christian networks, Light of the World managed only about $5 million worldwide across September, nowhere near what was needed to cover costs. Opening weekend numbers were dismal, and without strong word of mouth, theaters quickly shifted screen space to bigger titles. Critics were lukewarm at best. Some faith-oriented reviewers praised the film's sincerity and commitment to scripture, but secular critics were less forgiving. Many pointed out that the animation felt dated and stiff compared to today's slick, high-budget family films. A common refrain was that the movie felt more like a Sunday school lesson stretched into feature length than a cinematic experience. Audiences who weren't already deeply invested in its message simply didn't see a reason to buy a ticket. The timing of its release didn't help either. September was packed with louder, flashier offerings that dominated the family demographic. With Demon Slayer Infinity Castle commanding younger viewers, Light of the World got lost in the noise. Its narrow targeting meant that once the church-going demographic had turned out in modest numbers, the film had no one left to sustain momentum. Horror movies are usually one of Hollywood's safest bets, but this September, Him proved that even horror can miss the mark. Directed by Justin Tipping and produced under Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw banner, the film stars Marlon Wayans, Tyreek Withers, and Julia Fox. With a production budget estimated around $27 million, Universal positioned it as a major horror release for the fall season. Opening weekend started with some promise, about $6.4 million on Friday including previews, but momentum stalled quickly. By Sunday, the film had fallen short of its projected $15 to $18 million opening, landing well below expectations, and by the end of September, the film only grossed $14.5 million worldwide. Critics weren't kind either. While a few admired its ambitious mix of sports drama and horror, many called it uneven and confusing. One reviewer wrote, "It's like two different movies stitched together, and neither one fully works." Audiences agreed, handing it a poor C cinema score, which almost guarantees weak legs at the box office. So why did it flop? Timing played a role. It was released the same weekend as Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, which completely overshadowed everything else in theaters. But more importantly, Him just didn't deliver the scares or cohesion horror fans were hoping for. For a genre that usually prints money, it is shaping up to be one of September's biggest disappointments. Talk about printing money, that is also something the director of the next movie thought he would be doing. But guess what? Some sequels arrive decades later, banking on nostalgia to carry them through, but nostalgia only goes so far if the movie itself doesn't deliver. Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues, was supposed to be a love letter to fans of the 1984 cult classic This Is Spinal Tap. Instead, it turned into one of September's biggest misfires. Directed once again by Rob Reiner, and bringing back the iconic trio Michael McKean, Christopher Guest, and Harry Shearer, the film had everything in place to please longtime fans. Its reported $22.6 million budget wasn't astronomical, but it was more than enough to expect at least modest commercial success. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The film limped into theaters with an opening weekend of just $1.6 million, and by the end of September, it had grossed barely $2.5 million in the US and $2.8 million worldwide in total. That's less than 15% of its budget, making it a clear box office disaster. But is the movie really that bad? While some appreciated the effort to reunite the band for one last hurrah, most reviews called the comedy tired and thin. Empire magazine noted that the jokes just don't bite the way they did in the original, and fans echoed the sentiment, saying it felt like a parody of its own movie. Timing played a big part in the disappointing numbers, but more importantly, Spinal Tap 2 seemed to misunderstand what made the original so special. Instead of feeling fresh and sharp, it felt like an encore nobody asked for. This one will go down as a textbook example of how even cult legends can't always recapture past glory at the box office. Sometimes real-life underdog stories seem like they were written for Hollywood, and yet, when Hollywood actually puts them on the big screen, audiences don't always buy a ticket. The Senior, directed by Rod Lurie, is a perfect case study of that disconnect. The film tells the true story of Mike Flint, a 59-year-old grandfather who discovers he's still eligible to play one final season of college football. It's the kind of setup that should write itself. Grit, determination, and a second chance at chasing your dream. With an estimated production budget between $10 to $20 million, the studio clearly hoped to score a mainstream inspirational hit that could play to both sports fans and faith-based audiences. Michael Chiklis, best known for The Shield, takes on the lead role, with Mary Stuart Masterson, James Badge Dale, Brandon Flynn, and Rob Corddry filling out the cast. On paper, it had all the pieces to become the inspirational sports drama of the fall. But then came the box office numbers. Released wide in US theaters on September 19th, The Senior has earned just about $2.8 million since. That is shockingly low for a film given a wide release, especially one built around the feel-good, family-friendly premise. The critical reception, however, wasn't terrible. The Hollywood Reporter praised it as a solid, heartfelt drama, noting that while the story follows familiar beats, it lands them with sincerity. RogerEbert.com added that it checks all the expected boxes of an underdog sports movie, with Chiklis delivering a committed performance. And audiences who did see it responded well too, giving the film an A cinema score. That kind of grade usually points to strong word of mouth. So why didn't it work? Timing for one. The movie was released into an incredibly competitive September crowded with blockbusters and high-profile adaptations. A quiet football drama simply didn't have the marketing muscle to stand out. Another problem is scale. True story sports dramas can sometimes find success with a major star or a festival buzz campaign, but The Senior lacked both. Chicley's is respected, but not a marquee name who sells tickets. And while critics were kind, they weren't shouting from the rooftops about it either. Ultimately, The Senior is a reminder that box office success isn't only about how good a story is, it's about positioning, marketing, and catching the cultural moment. On the scoreboard of September releases, The Senior goes down as one of the month's biggest flops. Or maybe that spot is already reserved for the next one. Stephen King adaptations usually spark curiosity at the box office. Horror and dystopian thrillers based on his work tend to have built-in audiences, but this September, one such adaptation fell short of expectations. The Long Walk, directed by Francis Lawrence, known for the Hunger Games fame, was billed as a haunting dystopian tale about 100 teenage boys forced to participate in a government-run contest where walking is the only way to survive. With a modest budget of around $20 million, the studio wasn't aiming for blockbuster numbers, but it did expect a tidy profit. The film opened in the US on September 12th, starring Martell McKenzie, Cooper Dillon, and a cast of rising young actors meant to appeal to both young adult fans and horror audiences. But the numbers didn't match the hype. By the end of September, the movie had earned about $23 million domestically and another $3 million overseas, for a worldwide total of $26 million. On paper, that sounds like breaking even, but in Hollywood math, it's far from it. Theaters take their cut, and once marketing and distribution costs are factored in, the film is already underwater. Critics were kinder than the box office. Reviews described it as tense, faithful to King's bleak vision, and sharply directed, but others noted that the slow burn pacing didn't connect with mainstream audiences. The Guardian summed it up by saying, "The film is faithful, but maybe too faithful. What works on the page drags on the screen." That left The Long Walk in an odd place, admired by some critics, ignored by most audiences. Released in the middle of a jam-packed September that included comedies, horror franchises, and prestige dramas, didn't do the film any good either. King's quiet, brooding dystopia simply didn't stand out. Without major star power or flashy marketing hooks, it was a tough sell to casual moviegoers. Ultimately, The Long Walk may find a second life on streaming, where niche King adaptations often perform better, but in theaters, it stumbled, landing as one of September's clearest underperformers. And that's our list of September 2025's biggest box office flops. Which of these do you think deserved better? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. You won't want to miss the next video.